Welcome back to Defy the Odds Basketball, the podcast. I'm your host, Wyatt Guerin, and today's episode, we are going to be getting into a bit more of the science in basketball training. Now, with these kind of episodes, I do want to try and keep the main message, but I also want to break it down to the level where it's easily understandable, and I'm not, throwing crazy scientific terms at you. But before we get into today's episode, if you do enjoy these episodes and the podcast itself, please make sure to give it a follow, leave a like, and drop any comments with any ideas on what you want me to cover in future episodes. And if you do enjoy this type of content and want to see more like it, make sure to check us out on Instagram and YouTube at Defy the Odds Basketball, where we post stuff like this, but also some different stuff. So, with that being said, let's get right into today's episode. So, like I said, we're getting into a bit more of the nitty and gritty stuff here, but I think this is super interesting for, coaches and players, but I think also players, because I don't think they actually learn about this. And I think maybe some awareness to it will actually help their training. And coaches, I hope this helps how you go about designing your practices. So we are going to be getting into kind of the brain and how we think and make decisions. So there's two parts of our brain. So the slow thinking part of the brain, so the more conscious thinking, and also the fast thinking brain. So this is where our unconscious actions come from. So how it works, so the fast thinking part of the brain is always active, right? So this is scanning everything to see if it can come up with like an immediate reaction. If not, then it kind of goes to our slow thinking brain, and this is where we have to make more of a conscious thought about it and decision. So how does this relate to basketball? So again, I've talked about in other episodes my problem with scripted training. We've kind of touched the surface on it. So this is getting into a bit more about that and how it can actually cause athletes problems, more than what coaches and athletes think that it can. So my kind of thesis here, my opening statement is athletes need to think less while they play and let the fast thinking part of the brain take over. So when we just think about the kind of the definition I gave you about the slow and fast thinking brain, right? The fast part is always scanning, right, our environment, what's happening, to see if it can kind of come up with an immediate, decision. So when we see high-level players, like NBA players, for an example, we see them make these quick second decisions, right? Where they catch the ball and they are just driving right away, right? Because their brains are based on their long-term memory and something called schemas, so like their past experiences from playing so much basketball and being exposed to these different types of situations. So when they see it, their fast thinking part of the brain immediately reacts and it's like, oh, we know what this is. This is a closeout. I'm going to attack it. You might see sometimes where they hesitate or something, and sometimes this hesitation is bad, right? Sometimes you see it kill offenses, but sometimes you also see them, make maybe little hesitations or pull the ball back out to reset the offense. This is maybe more of the fast thinking brain, the slow thinking part of the brain, kicking into place here to be like, oh, what do I do, right? And when they pull it back out to reassess the offense, it's usually, because they don't have anything to go off. They don't have an advantage. So if we keep that kind of idea in mind, I actually want to introduce kind of an example. And I actually learned this in one of my psych lectures, which I thought was pretty cool. And I immediately thought about basketball, like I do with most things at school. But so the example is, it's a chess example. So they used a grandmaster, so like a really good chess player, and then a novice chess player. And they introduced them to two different situations. So for each situation, there was a chessboard with pieces on the board. They had, I think, a certain amount of time to look at it, or maybe however much, if they needed 30 seconds or a minute. And after that 30 seconds, it was like a picture of the chessboard with the pieces on it. after like the amount of time, they had to try and recreate the picture with an actual chessboard and pieces in front of them. So the first scenario, the grandmaster completely like dominated the novice. Like the grandmaster got, for all, I think all the example I saw, all the pieces he put on the board were right, except for the ones that he didn't put on because he didn't know where they went. For the novice, he didn't get like any right, maybe one or two. So, but in the next trial, the grandmaster and novice had about the same success rates. And what was different between the two was that the second trial, the pieces were just randomly put on the board. And the first trial, the pieces were put on in like an actual chess game. So a chess game was being played, like mid-chess game. So there was patterns that the grandmaster could pick up on. And that's why he was able to remember so much, is because they were patterns that he's seen before, right? And this is what we think about with like the long-term memory and like the schemas, like the past experiences. And this is why NBA players make these decisions so quickly, is because they have a collection of all this like patterns and decision making. But how do we get there, right? So I talked about kind of at the start my problem with scripted training, and this is where it comes in, right? Most of the time in basketball practice with your team, or in training, it's just scripted training. There's no representation of the game. There's 5-on-0 shell drill where it's just pass here, cut, and no intensity, no representation. You're missing out on defense, the pressure of the shot clock, everything, right? The pressure of the score, the pressure of your parents watching. All of this is not present. And this is why, so if we think about back to the example of our fast thinking brain acting on these kind of these quick decisions, right? And these quick decisions and our ability to recognize patterns come from what we've stored in like our long-term memory, right? With the grandmaster example, that's why he was able to do so good with the board that was being like played as a chess game. If we store our memory full of scripted drills, what do you think is going to happen? Well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. And if you think about it as in, you're ever watching like a game and it's like, why did that guy just make that pass? It was a horrible pass. He just passed it right to the other team. It's because his brain saw maybe didn't even see the defense, right? Our attention is like a flashlight in the woods. It's super limited. So he might not have even seen the defense, theoretically, like almost blind to that, because he's never, right? Because of his practice of only practicing 5-on-0 for the most part, he was like, okay, I got the ball here. I'm supposed to swing it to the top of the key. Defense intercepted it, or a defense was standing right there or something. And they're like, why did he make that pass? It's because of the training he's been put through. It's because of what the coach has literally been doing in practice. And he's basically been programming them as robots to be like this. So I feel like that's an example we can draw in here. So how do we not do this? How do we not be that guy in the court that's like, everyone's like, what just happened? We need to train this part of our brain. We need to install these kind of decisions and these recognitions of like patterns and stuff into our brain. And how do we do that? Well, we play more basketball. And I'm not saying like 5-on-0. I'm saying play basketball. Watch it too. Like watch like the Spurs offense with like Tim Duncan, Ginobili, Kawhi, like those, how they move the ball. Watch that, because that will help. And then go play, right? Your brain's going to see this film, and then if you go play, there's a good chance that some of it will come out. So this is a great way to build this up. And it's playing tons of pickup, or just building these decision-making skills by playing pick and roll handoffs, right? Where you have to make these decisions. And there's representation of the game, right? With defense, pressure of turning it over, pressure of the shot clock or the score or whatever. And in my mind, this is a fundamental. We talk about fundamentals so much, But decision making is ultimately one of the most fundamental things in basketball, right? Without in the last episode we talked about without it, decision making. Without decision making, you can have all the skill in the world, but if you can't make a simple decision and you're that guy that's just throwing the ball away, then you won't find playing time. So it's important that we train our decision making. And if we go back to the example of, just playing 5-on-0, this is like PB&J without the J, right? Decision making without defense, or learning math with only the numbers and no, signs. So no, positive or negative, no addition or subtraction signs. So it's just numbers, right? It's only half the equation. So that's why we need to incorporate defense into our training. Now, I know that's tough when we're not with a team, right? If you're a coach listening, I think this is a great way to incorporate, better results into your practices. And again, more efficient. You're working on defense and offense at the same time, right? Half the guys are playing offense, half the guys are playing defense. You can't get killing two birds with one stone. But now if you're an individual player trying to train by himself, I think some ways that you could do this are, one, I think watching film, and then trying to apply that into pickup or whatever you can as much as possible. I think another super underrated tool that I think no players are ever taught to do is visualization. So going into an empty gym, it doesn't have to be empty, but by yourself, and you visualize the game, visualize the score, visualize the shot clock, visualize the play. So maybe you're using a screen into a fake pass, visualize where the defense, the help defense are, and go through a bunch of different situations. I think this is a great way to kind of work on that by yourself. And then another way I think is to just include more variability in practice. So don't just repeat the same shot 200 times, right? Switch it up, right? Work on a step back, work on a sides, a bit of everything, right? So kind of equipping your toolbox and then using that visualization. I think those are some of the best ways you can kind of work on this by yourself. Again, then watch some film, maybe try and apply this into pickup. And then when you're in your team practices, hopefully your coach is, helping you develop your decision making. If not, try and be aware of this and try to be, working on it yourself, right? So I don't know it's hard. It is hard if you're doing a 5-on-0 drill, but maybe a transition drill. If it's wide open, right? Use that visualization. Be oh, player, just cut this guy off. Boom, right? At the end of the day, if your coach isn't developing your decision making, it's a hard line to cross, right? But try and do the best with what you have, right? And some of that might come from more playing pickup by yourself, with others, or training these kind of visualization. If you're training by yourself, or train with others, train with friends, and work on pick and roll, handoffs, all that kind of stuff. So I kind of want to, this is kind of the last point of this episode, that I kind of want to tie it back to how we talked about at the start about, I think athletes need to think less while they play. And because, again, we talked about these quick decisions. And when you try to think the game out with your slow thinking part of the brain, you might miss out on things like this. You might miss out on these decisions or these opportunities to act. Because you might see something open and you might try and plan it out too much. And even though it was open 2 seconds ago and you're okay, now I'm going to pass it, now it might be too late. And you're looking like the guy that was at the start of the episode where it's why did you make that pass? Because it might be for two different reasons, but you're still in the same boat where you're trying to think the game out. The first guy's problem was his decision making was based on 5-on-0 situations, right? But now you're almost overthinking the game, and now this affordance, so an opportunity to act, isn't available, but it was 2 seconds ago. So now you're trying to plan it out, and you make one of those stupid turnovers because you might not realize that the opportunity has passed to make that pass to your teammate. So again, I'll leave it there. I do challenge athletes to try and use some of these ideas we talked about in their training. So visualization, more pickup, and training with more people. So it could even be one-on-one, but you're trying to, develop your brain to see these, affordances, opportunities, and advantages, right? And that's what's going to help you make these kind of quick second decisions. And for coaches, I try and challenge you to think critically about, are you helping your athletes develop every part of their game that they need? And instead of getting mad at them for making these turnovers, think about what you could do to help them, and if you're training their decision-making enough. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Defy the Odds Basketball, the podcast. If you do enjoy these episodes, please make sure to give the podcast a follow, leave a rating, and drop a comment on any ideas that you want me to go over in future episodes. And if you do like this type of content and want to see more like it, then make sure to follow us on Instagram and YouTube at Defy the Odds Basketball. Your support means a lot. See you in the next episode.